The So the first one is according to Reuters, and I think one more source. The Iranians are seeking a fee equivalent to 5 to 7% of the value of cargoes transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is trying to bring it down to 3%. And I did a quick search to see. I did it during an interview to see what the Turks, and maybe you have the information, but what the Turks and others would be charging. It's 0.1 to 0.5%. It's incomparable. So Suez is 0.1 to 0.5. Same for Panama. The Bosphorus and Dardanelles 0.01 to zero point 0.1. So incomparable fees to what the Iranians are seeking based on these reports. So that's the first one. And then I saw another one came in from Iranian news, just came in not long ago, that they're also separate to this deal with Oman. They're also passing an act, a Strategic Control of Hormuz Act. They're preparing it to try to get it passed through Parliament, and that law is on top of the Iran-Oman deal. And they want to control all ships that go through. They want to make sure any countries that were part of the war pay reparations before using the Strait of Hormuz. The Americans and Israel and any other hostile countries are not allowed to use the Strait of Hormuz. And not only if they're hostile towards Iran, if they're hostile towards Iran and their allies, the axis of resistance, they called it the resistance front. So any country that attacks the Houthis, that attacks I don't know if Gaza, Hamas will be included, Hezbollah will not be able to go through the Strait of Hormuz. And any country that caused damage to Iran, obviously mainly the US and Israel in this case, will have to pay compensation fees before they use the Strait of Hormuz. So all this they want to pass on top of the 5 to 7% fee. Like that's pretty wild. I don't know if they're negotiating here, but that's pretty crazy.
Are you surprised?
I'd be honest, yes. Like that's a lot. That is a lot.
Well, let me talk about something else, but it's nevertheless related. I was involved in 1995 for a few months in the run up to the Dayton Accords that was supposed to end the Bosnian Civil War. This was a civil war between Croats, who were Roman Catholics, Serbs, who were Orthodox Christians, and Bosniaks, who were Muslims. Now, at the time, there was a lot of enthusiasm for forcing the repatriation of people back into areas where they used to live that were now occupied entirely by the people that drove them out. In other words, push Muslims back into areas where they used to live after they had been driven out by the Serbs or the Croats. Push Croats back into areas where they used to live when they have been driven out by Serbs and Muslims, and put Serbs back into areas where they used to live, where the Croats and the Muslims lived. Now, this went on and on. This was all in the name of, everything from equality to diversity to God knows what else. This had to happen. Wouldn't work. Too much blood has been spilled. That was the answer that I gave, and that was the answer that ultimately was accepted. Ambassador Holbrooke understood that and literally had to tell the Europeans, who were the advocates of this sort of thing, that's unrealistic. It can't be achieved. We came up with a settlement that wasn't perfect, but it has worked to some extent, and it ended the bloodshed at the time and has suppressed most of the violence since then. What you're dealing with in Iran right now, and you've got to understand this, are a lot of people who are victims of this war, people who have lost family members in this war. A lot of blood has been spilled, a lot of infrastructure has been destroyed. It will take a long time for this country to recover from what it has just been through. In other words, the population, the nation, is traumatized. You had similar conditions that existed in the aftermath of the Second World War, expecting everything to sort of be set aside in favor of goodness, understanding, and fair treatment to everyone is not realistic. Iran is not going to open its doors and welcome anybody that has worked tirelessly to destroy Iran with open arms. Now, I think that some of these things, as you point out, are probably excessive, not by Iranian standards, but by your standards, my standards. But nevertheless, we're going to end up in a situation that is very close to what exists today in the Dardanelles. I think that's where we're headed. The difference is that one side of the strait will be controlled by Iran, the other side will be controlled by Oman. Not surprising. That makes sense. Let's say that Bulgaria had controlled the European side of the Bosporus, then control would have been shared between the Turks and Bulgaria. But that wasn't the case. The Turks control the entire stretch. And they signed the convention in 1926, I think, the Montreux Convention, and they've controlled it and managed it very effectively ever since. I think we will see something similar with Iran. And I think whatever the initial fees are, they will be adjusted over time. But right now, you have people in the government who are angry, who are striking back in their minds in defense of their country. And they're saying, damn it, these people that have done so much damage to us, not just in this war, but in the years leading up to it. You got to go back to the Iran-Iraq war and remember that, because all of the Sunni Arab states were pouring money into Saddam Hussein, as we were, by the way, and equipping Saddam Hussein in the hope that he would march into Iran and destroy the Khomeiniist revolution, which at the time we were comparing, believe it or not, to the Bolshevik revolution. Now, you've got to go back and understand the past if you're going to appreciate the present. So this is not a new phenomenon for them. They look across the Gulf and they see all of these enemies from the border of Iraq all the way down to the border with Oman. And they're not terribly inclined to compromise and be friends with these people. These people are going to have to pay for what they've done. That's the mentality. We, of course, forget it. We're not even in the picture. We're not part of the negotiation. And unless we're willing to go back to the MOU, and I don't see any evidence at this point that we are, we will have no say whatsoever of any kind in anything. Everything will be decided by Iran in the Gulf, and probably with the urging support, whatever the word is, that encourages some degree of moderation from Moscow and Beijing, and to some extent also from New Delhi. These are great powers, and they will urge and have urged from the very beginning restraint, and they'll urge the Iranians to be more moderate in their demands. There's no question about that. Very few other people are going to have a voice whatsoever in what happens in the Persian Gulf. So I think we'll just have to be patient. We'll have to watch carefully how this develops. I think over time it will develop more positively. But the world is not going to return to normalcy. There's no chance for the Middle East to look the way it did, a year ago in another 5 or 10 years. That's not going to happen. The world has changed, period. And we, most of all, are out.